Hey there folks, it's Glenn with the almost world famous Cactus Atlas, and on today's episode I'm going to be taking a drive down Arizona's Ghost Town Road in southeast Arizona to explore a couple of its towns, namely Pearce and Courtland, Arizona. I'm right off of Route 191, not too far from Tombstone, Arizona, something everybody knows, and there's this road called the Ghost Town Road where there's this big sign right here that we're gonna start our journey. You can even see a couple lizards taking up residence up there on this sign. But as you can see, our first stop is historic Pearce, Arizona, established in 1895, a mining town. Seeing as though I love the country out here, where the Chihuahuan Desert starts to encroach into our state in the southeast corner, you start to see more things like yucca out here. Maybe not in this general vicinity, but I love this area, so I'm gonna film some of the drive. Although this isn't like an epic long drive type video, so don't get your hopes up if you came here for that one today. Probably be more on foot than in the truck, but I think we just have maybe a couple miles, couple minutes to go to get to the historic town site. And I guess don't get confused like I did, because there is like the modern day town of Pearce, and if you plot a route to it, it takes you straight into the center of some subdivision, like a modern subdivision. So you want the Ghost Town Road. Historic Pearce town site, gold discovered in 1895. It says by 1920 the population was 1,500, and by 2000 it was 15. So there's really not going to be many people living out here, and I wonder if that's the historic I know there's a historic like general store that has like a flat front and like gabled roof just like that. It's probably it. In fact, I think we found the mother lode. I think we found the jail and everything, so I figured let's just get out on foot. And I see a church. There's two, by the way, two buildings that are supposed to be on the National Historic Register, or the National Register of Historic Places rather, and I think it's this. There's a church back that way, and then that store that we're looking at in front of us, I think, are the two things that are known. But I do see other buildings around here, so maybe it's a good opportunity to actually just get the drone up and we'll take a look. But we'll start with a jail behind me here. So the story of Pearce is like many others that you hear. A guy came out here, a Cornish miner named Pearce, who the town is named after, and discovered gold and founded a mine called the Commonwealth Mine. I'm wondering if that hill back there is the location of the Commonwealth Mine, because you could tell there's a lot of mined out sections and tailings and trails up on that, so that's very conceivable. But basically a mining town that was built up around the mining industry. Surprise, surprise here in Arizona, but definitely an 1800s town for those that like the 1800s history, but albeit pretty late. So it sounds like the guy founded the mine in 1894, and then we saw they settled the area, and then the town was founded in 1895, and it also had a railroad that came out to it, actually, if you could believe that. So this is a historic jail, huh? This is a very common thing you see in a lot of the explorations we've been doing out in this area, where almost, if you go to a ghost town, Courtland is a perfect example. All that's really left standing there is the shell of their jail. Probably not unlike this thing. They weren't big. They probably held anywhere from like 2 to 8 people at a time. Always, later ones made with concrete, which is why I think they still exist. They're not like pure wood like a lot of structures are. And oftentimes I'm finding that's all that's left. So Pearce has a little bit extra than Courtland's gonna have. But here's another example of what I'm talking about, another concrete jail. So we know the town was established in 1895. You had people settling out here in 1894. And this thing is 1915, so clearly they built this a little bit delayed. It wasn't one of the first buildings out here, which isn't uncommon. Take Gleason, Arizona, which is on this ghost town trail. Not gonna do that on this episode because I filmed a standalone one for that. They also had a jail that was put in there later, around 1910. So this is kind of similar, same era, maybe 5 years later than the one we saw in Gleason. But once again, not dissimilar at all. And the one in Gleason is probably the main thing to go see there, and it still stands to this day, once again, because it's built in a sturdy fashion like that. And it makes you wonder also, like the other towns that we visited all throughout our journeys, not only in southeast Arizona, but I'm thinking like Wickenburg, Ruby, Arizona. The stories always seem to go that before the permanent jails were built, you might have had a wooden jail, but even before that, oftentimes they'd find a tree where they could just shackle people up to a tree or chain them up to a tree as a temporary way to hold people. So I'm wondering, what the story is with Pearce. I haven't heard about any jail trees or anything, but being as though there was mining happening in 1895, almost certainly some boozing, some young miners that get hot-headed, you're gonna need a place to have people cool off. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was something that predated the jail here that held prisoners, but most likely my guess is jails like this very often were just the drunk tank. Probably the biggest, the most common crimes were people that were really drunk, maybe some assaults, like assault charges, people fighting drunk. You hear that over and over and over. So I'm gonna guess you probably had more drunks staying in here than murderers and things like that. But you could have people that committed serious crimes out in these places too, being held to be taken to a more permanent jail, but I didn't really get to read any history on the notes on this thing. There's some I'm guessing those are just for fun, those what look like headstones. John Wayne, 1807 to 1879. Galeyville, the town, 1883. So that's not really even a person. That's a town where, if you know the tombstone history, like Curly Bill Brocious, John Ringo, a lot of those guys were actually living out in Galeyville on the other side of the Chiricahua. You can't get to it anymore. It's on private property, and I don't think there's much to see anymore out there anyway. But that's just, I don't know, this is kind of interesting. And then there's Dam Do-Gooder in 1888. So I don't really know the meaning of these, but they are kind of, funny and humorous, I find. I did mention earlier I wanted to get the drone up, but unfortunately the townsfolk here have declared this a no drone zone, which you can do legally. So even if your sectional charts show that you can fly somewhere and you don't see any other evidence otherwise, once you start seeing these things, private property owners are entitled to prohibit drone operations from being launched anyway here in town. I'm assuming this is basically a town thing, so I am going to respect their rules, but just wanted to point out, because I mentioned earlier, we could probably get a drone out and do a nice little survey of the town, but I guess we're not going to be able to after all. Over here looks kind of interesting to me. They have like an awning they built over there. I don't know if they excavated a site or why they did that. Sometimes you'll see archaeologists in museums do things like that if there's something of interest. Maybe we'll go around there and peek and see if we see anything. But over here is another fenced in thing with probably a historic building that was once here. I don't know if we're gonna get any info on what it was, but you could see another concrete structure of some sort that's completely collapsed. Why it's all fenced in like that, I find to be kind of a curious thing in and of itself. I don't know what they're protecting against. It's like, not that you could do much more damage on that thing, but to each their own. But I do presume it's an item of historic interest in why they did that. I am curious about that other item over there, and we're gonna walk over and see if there's anything. I know there's a lot of barbed wire here, so it looks like there is a trail. Oh, in fact, I guess you can go in here, so why don't we actually just do that? I was gonna just stay on the periphery of this. I thought this was off limits, but apparently not. We're in. Now we can actually look at the jail a little bit better. You can see, I'm gonna guess that's the original door. And very scant lighting, I'm guessing, in there, and barely any windows. I don't know if this opens. No, I saw a sign driving in that says they do an open house of the jail every Saturday or first Saturday of the month or something like that. So I guess if you want to go inside, they probably have like a guided deal where you just kind of show up on whatever Saturday it was and you maybe get to go in. Maybe this is the proper entrance. And there's a box here maybe with brochures or something. We'll see. Information. We'll take a look and see what that says. Let's try to see if it opens though. Now that is solid. That is not going to budge. But anyway, you could see same type of construction on this side. All that's really in there is a journal. So you can sign your name. I mean, it actually looks full to the brim. But if you want to see other people that have visited here at the jail, you got a journal. But there's no info about the jail or the town as I was hoping. Because the internet's pretty scant on what I found here. All right, we're here at the crossroads. You can see there's a historic cemetery down that road. Might go check that out. I don't know how far down that is. See the jail back here. There's plenty of parking. And I think the next thing that I want to see is this thing, the Soto Brothers and Renaud store. Renaud, who knows how they pronounced it out here. If you were French, you would probably say Renaud. But I doubt that they were fluent French speakers out here back in the day. Looks like there might be a couple other historic buildings. There's like signs in front of some of them. So we'll come back and look at those. And then there's like probably a modern pottery store. It doesn't look like it's open today, like an art gallery. And then a bunch of old wagons and things down that way. But it looks like oh, is this for sale? Amy. Huh. The historic Pearce Mercantile. This beautifully restored and upgraded property hosts a 2-story adobe structure, living quarters, intact blacksmith shop, blah, blah, blah. So you could have it all for the great price of $1.2 million. And they have a video tour, I presume, of the inside on Facebook. Wow. If we had an extra $1.2 million, I might be a buyer on something like this because it's in good shape, I would say. I haven't seen the inside, but probably could do something with this. So this store, according to Wikipedia's information, they have a page about the store. It's probably the most important building in town throughout most of its life. And the store, it says it was built in 1893, so a couple years before the date they give to the town's founding. And I think the Soto brothers owned it, and it originally was just a lumber store, but they very quickly broke it down and made it into an adobe structure, which is probably a more appropriate choice for the hot temperatures here in southeast Arizona. But you can see this building probably was the center of town, served as a general store. It got put on the National Register of Historic Places in 1978. And I think it kind of served as a general store even into more modern times. But I don't think you can go in anymore. I don't think it's actually servicing anything. And I've not heard or read anything about being able to go inside or tour it. I don't think it's being used as a store today at all. I wonder if this pump here designates that it was also a service station. Because interestingly, look, that thing sits on a foundation that it's bolted to, shaped just like the pump. So that's pretty permanent, and there's nothing else like that on the sidewalk. So I bet you this also was an old antique service station at some point. There are some cool things in there though. This canister, Office of Civil Defense, supplies for 50 people. It's got toilet tissue can opener, commode liner, and gloves and some other stuff. Looks like a World War I era helmet. Some other survival biscuits. Melrose Park, Illinois. I don't really see a date. Oh, packed 1962. So I wonder if this was cold era, nuclear war supplies or something, and then, some other ordnance or shells of ordnance. But unfortunately, I think this is about the best we're going to be able to do here is window shop. And you can't really, I can't find any windows to get a good view in there. I want to see what that's like so badly. I don't know what's in there today, being that it's for sale. I don't know how long it's been closed like this. I think I read something like since the 1990s it hasn't really serviced any public function other than maybe just coming out and looking in the windows or something. But if anybody knows more about that, let me know. But for sale. And that building across the street, I kind of peeked at the sign over there, is the historic post office for the town, clearly with modern blue paint on it. And hitch posts for horses. So the sign says it's the Old Pearce Post Office. Post office was established in Pearce Camp in 1896. At the time, the Soto Brothers and Chatham store served as the first post office location, with Thomas Chapman as the first appointed postmaster. The post office was later relocated to the Sadobe building. Gladys McLeod was the last postmistress to serve at this location. It was moved to Sun Sites in 1967. So the old post office here, which definitely has had some restoration, I would have to assume, but another 1800s era building out here in Pearce. So what it sounds like to me is that across the streets also served as the post office until this thing behind me was put in place. And other than an old historic graveyard, or cemetery I should say, the sign points down that way, I think, hopefully I didn't miss anything spectacular, but I think this is pretty much what's left of Pearce. I would say there's a little bit more to this than I thought it was going to be. And this store, I was unsure of the status of it, because if you go to Wikipedia or some site like that, I think it says the photo they used was from 1990, and it kind of assumes, you know, it doesn't know the current status. Well, I'd say the current status is this building is still here, and it's a beauty. And it seems like it's in really good repair. I don't see anything like falling over, falling down, so curious to know who buys it and what they do with it. Hopefully they do something cool with it. Maybe turn it into like a hotel, a boutique hotel or something. Alrighty, so that's Pearce, most of Pearce. I want to say there's a church back here that's also on the National Register of Historic Places. I think I spotted it back here. It doesn't look that terribly interesting, to be honest. No offense, town of Pearce, but I assume it's got some age to it.
Then turn left onto 4th Street.
But we'll see if this is actually it. Google Maps is going to try to correct me because I'm kind of taking a detour now on the back streets of Pearce. I want to say right here is the historic church from the early 1900s, if I am remembering correctly. It's private property today anyway. There is a plaque on it, the National Register of Historic Places plaque, but can't go past that barbed wire, so I'm gonna just do a quick drive-by for you. And I'm also skipping the cemetery on this trip, just because we're combining two different towns in one video, so I don't want to make this painfully long. Although some of you enjoy longer videos, I know. But anyway, let's continue down the Ghost Town Road. There were some interesting looking residences or buildings kind of off a block or two. And they have older looking roofs on them that look like things we've seen from the early 1900s, but I'm gonna just guess it's all private property. And that's what I wanted to try to use the drone for, was to get a look at that, but that's all right. We're gonna continue the Ghost Town tour for today. We're heading off to Courtland. Oh, we got a primitive road. We got some dirt road driving to do, yeah. I wasn't really sure. So if you're gonna come out here to visit this sometime, just know you do got dirt. But I would also say that these kind of roads are exquisitely maintained, it looks like. So outside of being a little bit bumpy, I would say just about anybody so far should be able to get back here. So I've been driving a few miles here. We only have about 3 miles left till we get to the town site, or the former town site of Courtland. Like looking up on some of these hills, they look like they're cut. I see like old roads that seem to be going to the top. So evidence of old mining operations, I would say, out here. And I guess while we're driving out to this thing, let me maybe get the basics out of the way for Courtland. So Courtland is not quite as old as some of the other history we've been exploring out this ways the last couple days. It might be one of the more recent ones, but it didn't last long. The basics are, this town was essentially founded around 1909 and it was named after a person of the last name Courtland. And it was here to service the copper mining industry. They discovered copper out in this region. There were 4 really major mining corporations that were doing operations in this area around the time, and it was a rich enough strike that it attracted people out here. And I think they had a couple thousand, wow, a lot of washboards, a couple thousand people living out here during that time. So a pretty sizable little town, I would say. And it even had a railroad. Also, just like we learned with Pearce, they had a railroad that apparently connected to it that the mining companies helped to fund and build. Presumably to haul out ore or processed ore, I would guess. And it was only around maybe for a couple decades. And then I want to say by the 1930s, it was pretty much a ghost town, and really there's almost nothing left. Just a few things left today, with only I believe one building still stands, and that would be an old concrete jail. There's a really good old photo of the town that's on Wikipedia. It's like a long panoramic looking shot, probably taken from the east looking west approximately. So somewhere off to the left of the road, probably up high on a hilltop, looking down on the town. And you can see, there's lots of buildings, like stores, residences, what look to be maybe like canvas tent style buildings. It's hard to see in great detail, but that to me is like probably our best guide for the day. I read something also about there being somewhere around here some kind of diggings that were actually done not by Americans or Mexicans or the Spanish, but the older tribes that lived in the area. I want to say Hohokam, if I remember that correctly. I'm not sure. But I think there's a lot of like world-renowned turquoise that you can find in this region. So I assume the indigenous people of those times were digging around for turquoise, but I don't really know where those would be. Now, what I'm expecting to see, because I've done some research, some light research, is once we get down to where the main street was, I think around one of these bends, I think you could still see portions of sidewalk where all of the buildings from the photo I showed you are visible. We'll try to see if the landscape resembles what we see in the photo, so I can maybe try to line things up. And then of course the jail, you see diggings all around the landscape off to the left that look older to me. I'm gonna guess this area down here, we're kind of getting into the downtown area, but being as though the jail's coming up, I guess we'll just kind of pull over, maybe start an exploration on foot.
You will arrive at your destination.
Saw like a little metal shack kind of in the overgrown desert out there. And yeah, I do see, I think we are like in the downtown area here. There's a sidewalk right there, probably where all the storefronts would be, and then the old jail. How cool is this? I think there may be more to see up ahead, so we're going to continue driving a little bit when we're done with this main area. But I do know in the old photo, I know there's a road or something that goes off that way you can see, and there's a curve. So I don't know if we're on the curve seen from the photo. And I don't know what kind of, lenses they used back in the day. I wouldn't be surprised if we're standing in that location and somebody was standing way up on that hilltop looking down on the town, maybe something like, down this direction. I can't be completely sure, but that's my best guess. This might be about the same size as the Gleason Jail now that I'm coming up on it. And just like the Gleason Jail, I bet you there's a wall covering the whole front of it, and there's probably a door in the center. But that very much, I don't know if it was built by the same people, the same construction technique. I didn't read any detail about that, unfortunately. I just saw something that it kind of resembles the Gleason Jail. And sure enough, we can show some footage of what that looked like. It really does. So the interesting thing about this jail, before we go in, I think there are actually 2 bathrooms on the inside that were for the inmates. I think it probably held somewhere between 2 and 8 people at a given time, going by memory on some of these facts. But I do know it was called like the Bright Jail. I think there was a sheriff of the same name, or the Bright Hotel, kind of as a joke, because a lot of people apparently got in trouble, probably for minor things, I'm gonna guess, so they could actually spend the night in here rather than their miners' tents and miners' shacks out in the hot desert. This at least would have had running water, and it probably was a lot cooler. So I could totally get that standing out here in the heat. Now, before I go in there, I've seen other videos. There is gonna be, unfortunately, graffiti on the inside, and there's probably some naughty words spray painted on the wall. So I just wanna give a heads up, because I do try to maintain a family-friendly channel. If you've got kids watching and you don't like that sort of stuff, I'm not gonna not film. I'll try to just keep bad words out of frame the best I can, but just a heads up, unfortunately, you know how it goes with stuff like this. Put some concrete in the desert, and on will the spray paint cans come. Hopefully there's no critters that have taken up residence. And it almost, standing here now and seeing it, you can kind of see, maybe this is a clue, that concrete patio on the front is probably where there was one door in the center, just like the Gleason Jail. And then in the Gleason Jail, we didn't get to go inside though, so it wasn't open. I don't know if they opened it at all, but this is it. Looks like you could see the windows where the bars once were. I can't remember which jail. I lose track because we've seen so many jails, but I know one of them, they removed the bars and they repurposed them at a jail. I want to say in Benson. It may have been this one. Here's one of the restrooms, I presume, or what's left. Look at that. You could see like the plumbing where the hole was, either, I assume, for a toilet. I don't know if there was a sink in here too. Maybe both. But sure enough, take a look at the ceiling, and all of you can see the concrete is kind of decaying with time. This is certainly over 100 years old now. But what a fascinating thing. I just wish that people wouldn't feel the need to vandalize stuff all the time, because people just can't help themselves when it comes to stuff like this. I never understood that. All right, we're gonna peek around this side. The scary thing is these flies are really loud. They sound like bees, but I don't actually think I see any bees around here. And I do see some naughty language in here. This is cool. They didn't have this on the other side, but you can actually see probably the original bars and what it would have been like in here. So it would have been pretty dark, I imagine, in the cells. I don't know if they had any light fixtures. There is a hole up there, so I don't know if there was like some kind of wire run through there with a light fixture or just natural lighting that came through that. I don't know. I imagine it was sealed because you didn't probably want the rain to come in here. And then here's the restroom. Let's take a peek. Same thing. It's kind of darker on this side because there's less hole in the wall, but you do see a hole down there. I'm looking through my camera's viewfinder to see that. It has better eyesight than I do. And I'm looking on the wall. I thought some of that lettering looked different. I was like, is that graffiti from a different time? But I don't think so. But essentially, there you are. There you have it. So there were times in this general vicinity in the early 1900s where, like I said, I know there was raiding from Mexicans, Pancho Villa's people and Pancho Villa himself. Same thing at Ruby, Arizona, which is near the border, not in this area, further west from here and south, but that was also kind of under the regions that Pancho Villa and Mexican raiders would come up, and there were murders from that, like back in the day. So it was nothing to be trifled with. So I'm guessing, I know there was a shootout between some Mexicans and the sheriff, not in the town proper, but in the vicinity. So that was like some evidence of violence that was going on. Not saying that was Pancho Villa's men at that point. I didn't really see any deep info on that, but there's only one, I think, murder actually in the town itself. So a woman was arrested and convicted of murdering her boyfriend, shooting her boyfriend somewhere in town. I don't know if there was alcohol involved or what happened, but maybe she was more in a defensive mode, I don't know, but whatever the case, she ends up getting pardoned later on by George Hunt, the governor of Arizona, probably in the 1920s, if I had to guess. I think that was during his time in the mid to late 20s, if I remember. But other than that, there's really no stories of like real like Old West shootouts or anything like that. But I do predict that, you know, that age, the early 1900s, out in these remote parts of Arizona, I always like to remind people that it wasn't like New York City of the early 1900s. It probably leaned more towards like something Old West feeling than something cosmopolitan, even like Tombstone or something like that. So it would have been a pretty tough ride out here. Think without air conditioning. I mean, yikes. If you live in Arizona, you know what I'm talking about, especially down here where it's more humid. But yeah, there you have it there, the Courtland Jail. I should be calling all of these videos the jail tours, because it just, anywhere in southeast Arizona, it seems like the last building standing are always the jail. You got one in Gleason, you got one in Pearce that we saw, and now we can add Courtland to the mix. So if you're doing the ghost town tour, as it's called, taking this road that we're taking, I think you can continue to go to Gleason, which go watch our other video on that if you want to see it. We've already released it, but it really should be called the Old Jail Tour, because the jails are the most preserved, best lasting things on the land out here, understandably, when you see what they're made out of. All right, that was a treat. I liked that a little bit more than I thought I would, and I especially liked it because I'm back in the blazing sun over here. My goodness, it's hot. Whew. So other than the jail, doing my kind of Wikipedia level research for this one, I didn't see like any information about what buildings were where or anything like that. Other than this town did have a lot of things that were really modern for the time, even including like an ice cream parlor in town, which Rhyolite interestingly had also. But I see things like this, and usually when you see concrete like that with bolts sticking out of it, they had some kind of heavy machinery, usually having to do with mining, mounted to the top of that. So I really couldn't tell you what that was, or if we're going to have luck looking at the old photo and trying to deduce where I'm standing and what might used to have been here. All right, I'm going to walk around the bend here. See a lot of rock back there that maybe was blasted away, I don't know. But over here, to me, looked like a sidewalk. And I'm combining it with knowledge of that photograph and seeing like the main thoroughfare, which occurs right after a curve in the picture, to me it looks like, and then it kind of straightens out a bit. So I'm thinking that's what we're looking at here. And you definitely see kind of the remnants, foundations of old buildings here all on this side. So I think we're standing in downtown Courtland at this point, and this sidewalk probably would have been the main sidewalk in front of all the storefronts that you could see in that old picture. So let's kind of walk up on the sidewalk then. And I'm assuming sidewalk and not just the foundation of the buildings, because to me it looks more sidewalky than the building, but look at that. And then you could see the squared off kind of partitions for the various buildings that would have been here. Looks like they would have been kind of narrow fronts and went back quite a ways. I don't know if right here is an alley or if it was just one building after another. But you could see this whole area going all the way back there. There's even like a little column right there. Probably a corner of some building. And I'm gonna guess a lot of this was probably made of wood. I'm gonna guess that a lot of it was removed and salvaged and reused elsewhere and years later. I could have that wrong. I don't know if there was any major fires or anything like that, but this is a little bit cooler than I thought it was gonna be now that I'm standing here seeing this. You have to use your imagination, of course, but still pretty fantastic. Let's now continue up the road a little bit. I was looking at that old photo, trying to see if I could match up something to confirm if that's where I think all of the main buildings were. But I'm kind of iffy. I'm not sure. I'm going to keep an eye out off to the right to see if we see any other infrastructure. Sometimes it's harder than you think lining up old photos like that. A lot of private property, I would say, on the left and right. There's some other old building over here, though, it looks like, maybe on the left. I think when I turn around and we head back to the downtown area, maybe maybe something will jump out at us more. Yeah, there's definitely something up on this hill. A stone structure, I guess we can very briefly get out and maybe take a look at. But other than that, I don't really know if there's anything else of particular interest out this ways. You can see evidence of mining all over these hills here. Piles of waste rock, diggings. Part of me wonders, are any of these the old Indian, Native American, indigenous diggings? But I don't know what that would look like or how to tell the difference. Ooh, it's got windy. So look at that. I wonder what this would have been. It's really cool. I'm gonna guess, I don't know. I've heard that in the 1800s they had some stuff, was it caliche or something like that? I forget the name, but some kind of concrete-like material, like mortar to put in between rocks. So I don't know how to tell that between modern concrete or if that can help us date this construction technique, but clearly they didn't use adobe. They used some of the native rocks of the area, and they then used concrete or something to fill in the holes. That's a really cool old building out here, and I have no idea what it was. You could see a lot of it, the wall is completely collapsed and fallen over. It's a pretty thick wall they made, actually. Come over here towards the back and get a look facing back down this way. Yeah, I really would love to know more about this one. This one's kind of a beauty. I like seeing stonework like that. Who knows, it has potential to have some of it still standing hundreds of years from now, if we're lucky. All right, I'm gonna go a little bit further down, and then we'll turn around, swing back around down to what I think is the main town site where the jail is. And I'll spend some time getting the drone up and see if we see anything that we couldn't see on foot. But I'm thinking we're kind of leaving the outskirts of the town now. and that we're not going to see anything else, although I wasn't expecting to see that stone structure we passed. There's another structure out here, actually. There might be a little bit more to this than I had thought for some reason. What do we got here? Actually, there's a couple things out here we could take a look at. All right, you've got that concrete foundation up there, maybe a 2-story building, I'm not sure. And then another one over here that is like the same kind of technique I think we just saw back up on that hillside over there with some concrete. So here's this one. This one has a little bit more intact. There's still plaster on top of the stone walls here. Very sizable looking place. They had windows and doors on it. So it was either a store, some type of office, and least likely I would say a residence, a home. I would say probably some kind of a store, some kind of commercial enterprise would be my best guess for something this big out here and this well constructed. And kind of ornate, like some of the concrete work has some nice little touches up towards the top. You see that? You could still see some wood embedded in that column, and you could see where there's probably wood. Maybe that was a floor. This might have been a 2-story building here. I don't know. It's possible. It's pretty tall. You know, that's one thing I want to get better at and figure out better resources for this stuff is finding maps of towns or plots of towns that actually show what the buildings were, the business names or what have you. But another way maybe to go about that is if there was a business, you think there would be some kind of records left. So it wouldn't be the most fun research. It'd be very tedious. But I know a couple places I might be able to start with that. But if you wanted to find out the name of a building, who was in it, what the business was, the dates, it's just on the internet, it is virtually impossible to find abundant quality information, we'll say. You'd think in the age of digitization, there would be a lot more info than there actually is once you get into ghost towning. And I would say half of the information you find is highly suspect too. Likely part truth and part legend. All right, we'll get one last look at whatever this was. But whatever it was impressive, I would say. I like it. I think it's got style and looks pretty fancy for that time frame out here, I'd say. I'll sneak around to this other facade, and then we can also get a look to see if there's anything back here. I don't want to venture too far back because up a ways there it did say private property, no trespassing, but there are no signs of that nature over here in the vicinity of this building. So, and there's no gate, no blocked access, so I'm assuming this is meant for people like me. But, you know, I'm guessing the other side of the building, probably that front facade, I assume that was completely wide open, would have had doors and windows also, but this is a nice view of whatever that was. All right, I did try to brave coming up here after all. I felt like it would be incomplete not to. You probably hear flies dive bombing the camera and me. So if you hear buzzing, I apologize. But once again, I have no idea what this was, when it was. We're going to assume early 1900s with all this concrete work like that, and knowing we're next to Courtland, that would make sense. But whatever it was is pretty cool. You can also see that other stone structure right across the street from here. Let's turn around and head back to the town site. To the main town site, I should say, or what I think is the main town site. I don't see any other, I have a pretty good view down the road. It kind of opens up down here, and I don't see any other buildings on the horizon, so I'm going to assume we hit the outskirts of what Courtland has to offer us. But we get to do another sweep going back the other way, and I'm gonna try to see, you know, looking at these hills, do they match up with that old photo, potentially? Well, I'm pretty sure I got the drone up. I flew it up on that hilltop and faced back this way to see if I could line up landscape, and I think I did. I was trying to use the road also as a gauge to see the curvature in it, and I think I saw a little bit. I don't know if the road has changed since then, it's possible, but the curves look a little sharper almost than what I see in there. But my summary is, I don't know what else this could have been other than the old town. I have to think this is it. I have to think this is downtown. So what we're gonna leave it with today, but you could see that bump up there. I wanna say that is one of the hills that you see in the photos, and there's a road that kind of wraps behind it. I think I saw evidence of that, but it's hard to do. It's easier said than done. As always, being this is YouTube, if you like our videos and you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing so you don't miss other adventures like this one. And do all the other things, the liking, the telling of your friends. But also, if you want to help support the Cactus Atlas and help fuel upcoming episodes, we do have a Buy Me a Coffee site where you can donate to keep this operation afloat. And other than that, folks, I'm gonna say bye-bye. See you next week. You'll want to tune in to see what other adventures we get into. Until then.